Chapter 4. A Back Passage. Down in the cellar, Rosie had pushed aside an old washtub to reveal an opening in the wall. "Looks like the game is up, Leo. I'll miss your talents," she said. "And I don't know your story, young lass, but we're no fans of the prince round these parts, so I'll not be helping those henchmen of his. Now get away, both of you." Jenny didn't need telling twice. Following Leo into the cellar had been her only option, and now she thanked the gods it wasn't just to hide until inevitable discovery. Here was a tunnel and a way out. She dived into the hole first, brushing aside the cobwebs that crisscrossed its entrance. Dim light from the cellar illuminated only the first 10 yards of the earthen passage. Jenny wondered if she was destined to spend her life crawling underground. First the castle sewers, now this. At least the ground was dry. She wasn't sloshing through privy water. What little light there was blinked out. Leo's body had filled the gap behind her. Progress through the tunnel was tricky. Neither spoke for some time. Jenny held an arm outstretched in front to save her from banging head first into a corner or dead end. Her neck ached from having to bend. She thanked the gods that her tummy was full and she'd had some rest, but she longed to be back in the hay bales at the barn, sleeping while Croak kept watch, or even better, back in her own bed before a horny evil prince had set his sights on her. Leo fell further and further behind, until Jenny could no longer hear his grunting and heavy breathing in the darkness. She stopped and waited for him. He didn't seem a bad type, a little weird perhaps, and his physique did not give her much confidence that he'd be a useful companion, but he'd allowed her to join him in his booth. That had been kind of him. She heard the crazy man in the tavern accuse him of adultery, and found that a little hard to believe. It worried her that she might now have implicated Leo in her own crimes. The soldiers might report to Erik that Leo helped her escape. That made her somewhat responsible for him. Jenny mulled this over until Leo caught up, almost flattening her in the dark. "Hey, watch it!" she whispered. "Sorry, I didn't see you," Leo panted. "Do you know how long this tunnel is?" She waited while he caught his breath, sucking in lungs full of misty air. "We're there," Leo said. "I thought that's why you stopped. Must be around the next corner." "And where is there?" "The blacksmith's on the edge of town. There's a trapdoor in his storeroom." It didn't take Jenny long to find the trapdoor in the dirt ceiling, above the tunnel's dead end. Nothing impeded it when she pushed hard. The door flung open and rewarded her with a spray of loosened dirt in the face. She hoisted herself into the room above. Moonlight glinted off rows of forged farming tools and weapons. Jenny listened for a second to ensure the smithy hadn't heard the intrusion. She selected a small dagger and tucked it into her waistband. Excuse me, a hand?" Leo whispered from below. It took a great deal of pulling, pushing, and grunting from both of them before they extricated Leo. "You should eat less," Jenny said. "That's not what the village women think," Leo replied, brushing himself off. With the smithy fast asleep in the adjoining room, the two crept through the door and into the yard. Leo shook his head when Jenny indicated he should also grab a weapon on the way. "I'm a lover, not a fighter." She rolled her eyes, checked the dagger was secure against her hip, and looked skyward for Croak. No sign of him yet, but she was sure he'd find her. They needed to move. It wouldn't be long before the entire village was teeming with Erik's men. "Which way out of town?" "There's two. The main road east, but that means going back through the village and past the tavern. Or there's the mountain road." "Mountain road it is. I was heading there anyway." Jenny strode off. "Hey, slow down. I can't go as fast as you." "Well, you mustn't try. I don't fancy being around here any longer." "Do you think we can make it through the Devil's Pass?" Leo asked. Jenny noted his use of "we" and sighed. For the next while, at least, they were companions. She regretted feeling responsible for him. How far could he walk? She wondered. He only had one thing in his favor, body fat to live off when they couldn't find enough food. 10 minutes later they'd left the village behind. The road soon narrowed to a path winding into the foothills. The mountains loomed above, their snowy caps glowing in the moonlight. A dark shape blotted out the moon before alighting on Jenny's shoulder. "There you are, Croak. I knew you'd find me." "That crow's your pet?" Leo panted beside her, trying to keep up. "I suppose that means we can't put it in a pie?" "First off, he's a raven, not a crow. There's a difference. And no, we can't put him in a bloody pie. You can forget any ideas like that right away, or I'll have him peck your eyes out." Okay, I'm hungry, that's all." "Hungry? It hasn't been long since you were scoffing down stew and ale. You can't be hungry already." Leo only shrugged. Perhaps having suffered similar attitudes before, he didn't bother with the counter-argument. The trio made steady progress into the foothills, despite stopping every 10 minutes for Leo to catch his breath. For now, the exertions of the uphill walk kept them warm, but Jenny knew when they stopped to sleep the cold would envelop them. They were ill-equipped for this journey. "I fear that if we sleep, we might never wake up. The cold will take us," she said as they stopped for the 10th time. Leo sat on a rock. Even as Jenny spoke, he could feel his buttocks going numb, as if the rock was a large slab of ice. He stood and beat his fists against his backside to get blood flowing through the flesh again. Jenny looked on and shook her head in despair. They had no option but to push on. An unlikely party of a dark-haired peasant girl, a rotund philanderer with splashes of his last meal frozen on his tunic, and a pitch-black raven circling above. Croak instinctively kept well away from Leo. He cawed his displeasure at the unfamiliar man in Jenny's life. With the incline growing steeper at every turn and the scrub on the hills thinning to tussock, Croak announced dawn's arrival. Jenny had learned to recognize the varying pitches in his calls. This one meant morning. Sure enough, the sky to the east had grown a tad lighter. A meek sunrise peeked over the horizon. "We shouldn't go any higher," Jenny announced. "The sun will warm us soon, but if we go above the snow line, it won't be enough to keep the cold at bay. And if we enter the pass, it won't reach us at all." Leo exhaled a tremendous sigh of relief, the breath clouding before his face. "Thank the gods! Let's stop!" He leaned forward, hands on knees, deciding to keep his backside off any icy rocks from now on. Jenny led the way off the path to a small outcrop of boulders surrounded by tussock grass. The boulders were high enough to offer some protection from the chilly wind blowing down the mountain. The two sat where they thought the sunlight might reach them later, and huddled together. The need for warmth overcame Jenny's misgivings as she drew himself into Leo's clumsy embrace. "I know I'll regret asking this," her voice sounded muffled against his chest, "but did you sleep with that man's wife, the one chasing you back at the tavern?" "Nope, but I satisfied her in ways he couldn't. I don't know why he's so upset. It's not like the wives leave their men. They come to me for some extra attention." "The wives? Plural?" "Yep, most of the women in the village. I thought that was what you were after when you sat in my booth. I have a special gift. They call me Leo the Licker. Or they did. I don't think I can go back there now. That means I'll never get to taste Rosie's stew again, or her ale. Oh my gods, where are we going to find food and drink?" Leo's sudden realization that he'd enjoyed his last bowl and tankard seemed far more important than the prospect of being beaten to a pulp or freezing to death in a mountain pass. Jenny was still absorbing the liquor nickname, recalling their first meeting in the booth and Leo's offer. How great could this guy be? She wondered. Her brief flings and fumblings with the boys in her own village had never led to any of them licking her downstairs. Did it feel good in the first place, regardless of who was doing the licking? And why was this big oaf so good at it? The sun rose higher, bathing the countryside with warmth and light. The line between dawn and day crawled up the foothills and over the two figures, huddled against the rocks.